So this is the fiscal year that ends June 30 and how we made the changes. Just how is that $4.3 billion we spent at the state, how is that all allocated? The biggest part right here is aid to individuals. Now this is mostly Medicaid, all right, or over a majority of this is Medicaid. And that's that joint program that we have with the state, or with the federal government rather, to help out low-income people in our state. But you can see that's $1.3 billion right here. This is 32%, or almost a third of our budget is aid to individuals. The rest, the next biggest chunk of that is special education. But you can see the state is making a significant investment in K through 12 education right here. Now, as long as we're talking about education, let's talk about this piece here, $588 million, about 14% of the budget, is the University of Nebraska. So they get a big chunk of that education budget, or of our state budget as well. Then we also, about 1% of the budget is state colleges, $53 million, and 2% of the budget is aid to community colleges, $96 million. So you can see that if you start adding up all the different parts that we have here with regard to education, the state is making a significant commitment to education. Almost 50% of our budget goes to education, whether it's K through 12 education or higher education. And then if you throw on the aid to individuals, now you've got almost 3/4 of the budget, or about 3/4 of the budget between education and aid to individuals that we allocate in that way. Now, we also have state aid to local governments, about 2% of our budget, a little over $100 million. We've got $276 million, or about 6% of the budget, is non-code agencies. And that's government speak for agencies that don't report to me. Okay? So these are agencies, thinking about Game and Parks, or the Tourism Commission. These are agencies that are run by boards of volunteers that don't report directly into the governor's office. In many cases, I appoint the volunteers, but I can't unappoint them. So once I put somebody on, they generally serve out their term until their term is up and they get reappointed, or I replace them with somebody else. Obviously the legislative process is a trade-off. It's a give and take. I don't expect the budget to look exactly the way I proposed, but here's my concern. One of the things, for example, that they're talking about doing is taking the gas tax dollars, things we use that are dedicated to building our roads, and basically taking that from roads and putting it into the general fund. Now, I don't believe that's right. That those gas tax dollars were dedicated to building our roads. They're paid at the pump. That's where those dollars should stay. So that's one of the fights, for example, we're going to have on the floor when next week that bill actually starts getting to be debated, because that is not something that I can support. I'm also a little concerned that if they don't cut the budget enough and try and take a lot of one-time money to meet ongoing expenses, that may work short-term, but then those one-time dollars go away and you're left with ongoing expenses. That doesn't work long-term. And so that'll be one of the other things that we'll have to take a look at in that budget to see how they're structuring that. Last year we came back with two bills, LB 958 and 959. 958 was really focused on limiting how fast ag land valuations could go up to 3.5% a year. That didn't actually survive in that bill and ended up being just an additional $20 million a year directed at ag land. 959 I worked on with Senator Kate Sullivan to really put some expense controls in around school spending. Now, a lot of those expense control measures got taken out, but two important things were left in there. One, we took the Qualified Undertaking Fund, which is a fund school districts can use to go over your levy limit by up to 5.2 cents. We got that reduced to 3 cents. And importantly, we took out the minimum levy requirement for the school aid formula. That's one of the things that's actually directly impacted the Pierce Public Schools. So the Pierce Public Schools have seen their state aid go from 11-12 school years about $1.5 million, and that drops to the 16-17 year just to $9,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with this proposal I've got. In the 15-16 year, they were actually getting about $200,000, but they hit that minimum levy requirement, and they lost most of that year. And that's why it dropped down to $9,000. Well, we got rid of that minimum levy penalty, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the school aid formula for next year, but that's one of the reasons why the Pierce Public Schools lost their state aid, at least in the last year, and so we've removed that penalty so that they wouldn't see that happen in the future. Now, of course, we at the state, we don't fix the levies, but if those levies had stayed the same, that would have meant $147 million in property tax relief in this year to our farmers and ranchers. That's substantial. That's a big deal. Now, also, because if we pass this bill, we'll be adjusting those ag land valuations. That means that we, the state, will have to start putting in more money to that school aid formula. So the way it'll work is our plan is to implement this in January of 2018, which means that those valuations would start showing up in 2019, which means then that's when it'll start impacting the school aid formula. We'll have to put over $30 million the first year into that, and then by 2027 that'll go up to about $45 million that we project the state will have to put in to that school aid formula. So that is part of how the state is going to have to make the continued investment in K through 12 education as a result of what we're doing here. Now that is the property tax piece of this. The other things I'd point out with regard to this is that this is not exclusive to other ideas with regard to things we can do on property taxes. There's a number of other things. We can reform the school aid formula, so for example, that every child gets something with regard to school aid from the state. We can look at the Commission on Industrial Relations, because that's one of the things, if you look at your school budgets, probably about 85% of those budgets are salary costs. And so if we don't have to keep doing that comparability, which is one of the problems, I came from the corporate world, this is why CEO pay keeps going up. They do comparability. You just compare it to everybody, it keeps going up and up and up. If we can reform the CIR or get rid of it entirely, that's another way that we can take a look at some of those things. So there's more things we can do with regard to the issues we've got on property taxes that have other parts of other reform that we can look at in future years. We don't have the time this year to do it, but I know that, for example, with Mike Groney, who's our new chair of the Education Committee, he is interested in school aid reform.